Good evening, everybody. My name is Dwimoh, and I'm a candidate for Brooklyn District Attorney. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about me. I went to Barnard College at Columbia University, and then I went to Georgetown University Law Center. Right out of law school, I came right to the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office, where I served for approximately 21 years. During the course of my service at the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office, I handled various types of cases. I started off in the Special Victims Sex Crimes Bureau, and then I rose into the Felony Division, where I became a senior felony attorney. I tried homicide cases in the Homicide Bureau, and then I became a Deputy Bureau Chief within the Trial Division, and then I was asked by the former District Attorney, Hines, at the time, to create something that had never been created before, and that was the Crimes Against Children Bureau. It was the first of its kind in New York State. This bureau focused solely on cases involving child victims. And the reason why this is important is because, as we know, children have no voices in the system. They can't go out and vote. They can't go and do a petition or come to a club and make decisions that impact their lives. They rely on the adults around them. So what I was able to do with an incredible staff, I was able to navigate the waters of an adult criminal justice system for the children to get justice. This becomes important because it lays down the foundation for me as how we need to start looking at the criminal justice system. See, the days of us focusing on lock 'em up, incarceration, conviction is a problem. We need to start focusing on the conditions, the reasons why. Why are people interfacing with the criminal justice system? I'm a firm believer when children are safe, and that's something that across the board, no matter where you are, what your socioeconomic issues are, what your racial, cultural, diversity, what background, whatever that may be, the one thing we hold dear is children and our seniors. But focusing on children, what I was able to do is collaborate with other agencies and other groups that lived within the lives of a child. Because I realized in order for children to get justice, the only way we can do this is for us to come together as a whole. So when I think about where we are now in Brooklyn and what needs to be done, as we're pushing towards reform and we're trying to get it right, many of our communities throughout Brooklyn just don't trust the community. Just don't trust law enforcement. They don't trust the police. They don't trust district attorney's offices. Many of it's because of what has played out right before our very eyes. So when I think about that, I think about how do we instill the trust? How do we deal with the betrayal? Now with children, when I dealt with child victims, most of the people who betrayed them and committed the crimes against them were known to them. They weren't strangers. So when it comes to betrayal, I kind of understand what that means to get someone who feels so vulnerable and get them to a place where they need to feel that they can trust the system. How do we do that? Well, we do that by bringing them together as a collaborative group. As prosecutors and law enforcement, we can't do the work in committing and keeping the community safe unless we have communities working with us. We need the nonprofits in the community. We need stakeholders that have been identified. We need to work together. Along that lines, we also have to hold law enforcement accountable, and we also have to get them sensitized. You know, it's really simple in some of the things that we can do. What I've noticed oftentimes is when someone feels that they matter, it goes a long way. So even for something as simple as an officer just identifying and saying, "Hello, good morning, ma'am," that can make someone's life different. I have 1 minute. So overall, when I look at the work that I did in the Crimes Against Children Bureau, I look at, after I left that, I was at the Borough President's Office, where I still am. I'm special counsel to our Borough President, Eric Adams, and where I've been able to work on behalf of Brooklynites in a non-criminal justice way in the policies that we have been able to put forward. But when I look at being your next district attorney, if I'm able to have that honor, the goal is to be proactive. The goal is to be out in the community. I'm tired of hearing about these big sky plans and ideas and studies, and I want to start hearing from the people ground up. I believe when people are invested in where we're going as a community, they're going to want to be a part of the whole the process. Along those lines, I'm going to be creating a youth advisory council throughout Brooklyn, because I have to bring the youth in. I got a timeout, so now I'm ready for questions.
Awesome.
Okay.
So I'm going to open it up with a little two-parter, actually.
Yes. Okay.
So what is your position on broken windows policing, and if it's a negative position, what specific policy proposals would you advocate for the DA and the police department in its stead?
Okay, well, when we look at broken windows, we have to understand one thing. That was a concept, a process, a policy that was used by NYPD. The problem is that it impacted our different communities differently. In communities of color, black and brown, and in poor communities, it impacted disproportionately. It was just unfair, and that's a problem. So when I think about how do we build the trust, as I talked about before, and how do we deal with the betrayal, we have to understand that some of these crimes, or people were being given warrants for, or getting caught up in the system, are things that they shouldn't be. You know, you shouldn't be arrested or have to go through the system or even get a warrant for riding your bicycle on the sidewalk, spitting on the sidewalk. These low-level infractions clog up our system. So what I want to do is I would look at those what were once crimes. I would not be going forward in those crimes. And in order to get people along, I have to educate law enforcement, but understanding as the district attorney, the ultimate decision rests with me. So if the policy of the district attorney's office is not to go forward in those and not to criminalize what has been deemed infractions, then that's what I would do. And I need to do that because it's about impacting fairly across the county justice, because it is about justice for all.
Awesome.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and open it up to membership. Does anyone have a question for DA candidates? If not, I have some more that I can.
Very good. Okay,
go ahead.
No problem.
We'd like to hear 3 specific changes that you'd like to aim to implement to make the judicial system more equitable, and especially for disenfranchised groups who live within Brooklyn.
Fantastic. One of the first things that I would do is I want to bring prosecutors, especially the certain precincts where we're seeing high crime and we're seeing communities totally disenfranchised. I got to build the trust. See, if a prosecutor is present, they can work along with NYPD, along with whatever services that we need. Because I believe when people have been victims of crime, especially in the initial stages, they need assistance like social workers. They need counselors. They need people to help them along the way. The same thing with an accused. See, an accused, we have to know who they are. And we have to know the circumstances. Now, don't get me wrong. If someone has committed, and it's alleged they've committed a heinous crime, I'm going to look at that very differently than I'm going to look at something that has been deemed low level. But it's about getting prosecutors a part of the criminal justice system on the ground, and that is at the precincts. The second thing I want to do is I want to work on continue what Ken Thompson did when it comes to the wrongful convictions. Wrongful convictions, it is unbelievable that it has happened, but it's believable, because it did. And what that tells me is that the level of scrutiny and the level of monitoring that needed to be done at the district attorney's office for throughout the last couple decades just wasn't done. And that's my change is going to be, is that we're going to be able to monitor from the top executive level all the way down, because this becomes key. Third thing that I want to do is I want to create my youth advisory councils, like I started talking about, because this is all about engaging the youth, engaging the young people, letting them know that they can be stakeholders. See, it's not about someone who's college bound necessarily. I'm looking at risk youth. I want them to get involved in their community, to know that they can have a voice, because I need to hear from them, because in order to affect policy and affect change, I need to hear from them and what their lives are like from a day-to-day perspective. As I move forward in the district attorney's office, we have to also focus on the technology. We got to get up to speed when it comes to technology, and we also have to just, again, instill the trust. One last thing that I'm going to do that I don't think many of the other candidates are really talking about is, what do you do when an officer discharges his weapon or her weapon and an unarmed person is injured or killed? You see, usually, historically, those cases are handled by the district attorney. I saw a lot of stuff that happened as a matter of fact when district attorneys have handled those cases that have impacted the communities, that the communities just don't believe that they can conduct a fair investigation. In order to build the trust, in order to deal with betrayal, I would hand those cases over to an independent party, whether it was the Attorney General or a special prosecutor. Because the truth of the matter is, I have been in precincts after a police shooting, and it's a different type of atmosphere than when I would normally go in as a prosecutor. And I think we have to identify and own those differences and understand that in order to move forward as a community, law enforcement and community together, we have to know that they have to know when I can say, you know what, this is going to be better done by another group, because you're going to feel better by their result, because you know that I work closely with them on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. And, just as I conclude, first of all, I just want to thank everyone for being here, because what I will say is this race is very important. It's critical because nationally, things are changing. And you have to start looking for a district attorney who's actually going to have your values and who's able to be an advocate, who's able to stand strong, because things that are going on in DC and the pushback we're going to get in terms of moving forward with reform, we've got to have an advocate. You don't need just a mere administrator. You need someone who's been in that office, who understands from the ground up what it is to handle these cases and work closely with the community. I hope you go to my website, learn more about me, and I really hope to get your vote as we move forward in the process. Thank you very much, and have a very safe evening, everybody.
Thank you.